All right, let's continue the conversation then. To talk to us about dealing with the disappointments with regards to matric results, we are joined by counseling psychologist Nkateko Ndala-Magoro. Thank you so very much for joining us on SABC News, ma'am.
Thank you very much for having me.
I mean, it's obviously a very difficult time for those learners who didn't quite make it in matric. I mean, as we see, just looking at social media, for example, it's parents posting their matric student learners, children who were in matric, and students themselves posting selfies and so forth, and really a time of celebration. And to not be able to partake in that must be exceptionally difficult for matriculants who failed. What is the thinking process, or what should those students really be thinking at this time as they battle with the ideas of failure or disappointment?
I think the first thing, and I'm going to sound a bit cliche in saying that really it is not the end of the world, especially given the kind of year that we have had of 2020. So as you are sitting there as a learner who has not made it successfully through this matric year of 2020, don't see yourself as holistically as a failure yourself. Look at the circumstances that were around you. Look at the odds, that were against you. Yes, the other students have made it against all odds. You made it, you are a total failure. There are still many chances that you can take off. There are many opportunities that you can take off to be able to look forward and have that celebration for yourself later on in life, be it that it's later on this year or next year or even in 2 years' time. So do not see yourself as a failure. Do not see this as an end of the world. This was a means to an end. It's another assessment, just like we have any other assessments in the world. And, do not feel like you are an outsider. There are many who are going through the same as you, despite the many that have also made it to this matric results.
And I guess it's important as well to emphasize to these learners that, at some points in our lives, we all fail, whether it happens in your, at the end of matric, or whether it happens in your 20s or 30s, at some point in your life, you will experience failure. But, I heard one of the principals in the clip that we played earlier on, when we were discussing the issue of failing matric, saying that something that he has noted, and I suppose he's talking probably around his own school, that some of these children have divided focus. So they have family responsibilities, and I'm assuming he means things like child-headed households, for example. How much of a reality is that in South Africa, where we find matric learners who have so much else that's going on, that it is near impossible really to just focus on what children should be focusing on, which is school?
Sure. And as you rightly pointing it out, and I want to actually even, separate the groups, as you mentioning the child-headed households. There are even other households where there are parents, but children are expected to do so much. And with them, the inability to be able to go to school or to be in a learning environment, I think parents saw the children and themselves not going to work or, losing jobs and, everybody being in the home. They might have seen the children as being available to do the chores, to send them around, and not understanding that they need to have the time to be able to study. The other category that I also want to speak about is, maybe not necessarily that they are sending them around, maybe they are giving them that opportunity to study, but they have younger siblings, or they are living in clustered living. There's no space for privacy to be able to read, and maybe the person, the learner, needs to wake up in the wee hours of the morning to be able to do that learning under candlelight or whatever circumstances, as your the previous speaker has rightly pointed out, to say, the coronavirus, as much as we think that this inequalities have been highlighted during the COVID-19, they were not necessarily not there. They've always been there. It's just that the COVID-19 has highlighted that. And then I come to the child-headed households, where the reality is there, and mainly because of the HIV pandemic, and also because of migrant labor. Even though we are in a very modern society, but they still migrant laboring, where parents will go into the cities and leave children in the rural areas to fend for the older ones. So, which means then if they are not in the classroom during the day, they will have to take care of these younger ones, which does not give them enough mental and emotional space to be able to focus if, the younger children or the younger siblings are sleeping, to be able to do that needed learning and studying. So, yes, the disparity of economic disparity is very, very wide in our society, in the inequality that we're seeing. Even as much as wanting a learner to be online, and yet they have to be taking care of the siblings. And how do you do that when there's noises around you, there's screaming, so there's playing that is around you?
And ma'am, just as we close our conversation, I just want to talk about whether or not you believe that schools are doing enough to help learners who perhaps are in need of the services that you provide. I mean, I remember when I was in school, there was something called a counselor at the school premises. And, if someone was dealing with perhaps grief or whatever it was, there was someone really on the premises every day. And I wonder if that is still the case, and whether schools are really doing that enough and making sure, the mental health of learners. I suppose last year was difficult because learners weren't even on school premises for most of the year. So I'm just wondering what your views in general on that are.
You pointing, you really highlighting something that we as people who are in the mental health space are really advocating day in, day out. And I'm not sure at which dispensation did school. And currently, the school counseling or the school psychologist is coming in at the budget of the SGB, so meaning that the schools which are able to, and which again, it highlights this gap, this disparity, this economic disparity, the schools that are able to afford, they are able to rope in their own psychologists to be on the premises versus the psychologists and the counselors coming from the district. And I hope really decision makers are listening to this, and policy makers are listening to this interview, to say that in taking the stand, or in me making a case for mental health support in the school environment, because it makes it also safer, where the learner does not even need to explain to the parents to say, this and that is happening, and maybe the parents don't even understand, or they're going to judge them. So this is very important, what you're highlighting. And
all right, it's unfortunate we lost the feed there, but that was a psychologist, counseling psychologist, Nkateko Ndala-Magoro there, speaking to us just as on the back of, yes, we're celebrating those matriculants and those learners who've done well and achieved well during 2020 and got their matric certificate, but also just remembering that there are those learners who had great difficulty last year and might not have been able to cope. Some of them, in fact, might have even lost parents last year. So certainly do think of that too while we are in celebration. All right, more news. After this, I'll be back at the top of the hour.